This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I am Reverend Bill Marcioni, here once again without Carol Lawrence to ask the important questions. I'm going solo one more time, and Carol will be back again next week. And I wanted to take this opportunity to just do some fundamentals, things that have come up for me in other areas. We sometimes get distracted by the new and exciting and intriguing things that are coming up. What I'd like to talk about today is how and why. How and why seems like those are very interesting and key elements in our inquiry into this New Thought teaching and the techniques of practical prayer and the workings of it. And what I'm going to say is that how and why in their own way are completely unacceptable, improper questions. And I'll explain. The question why, especially when it's in a spiritual context, often comes up to why would God let this happen? Or why do bad things happen to good people? And we want to know why. We want to have an explanation. We want to understand the rationale behind things that happen, especially when they're things that are unpleasant, that we don't like, that go against our sense and experience of order in the world. Why? Why did this happen? Why me? Why this? Why now? Why couldn't it be? Et cetera, et cetera. And the reason that's an unreasonable question, an unfair question, is it's none of our business why. I have mentioned numerous times in the past that this is the experience of life that we're in is in many ways a dramatic unfolding that goes from beginning to middle to end. And all of the activities we're involved in, or many of them, follow a dramatic story arc. And the classic one is the 3 acts, where in the first act we get to meet whoever the characters are and kind of get to like them and understand where the groove is of what's going on. And in the second act, something challenging or bad or uncomfortable happens. The villain shows up. That's where Darth Vader is there. That's where the love of his life disappears, or whatever that challenge is that happens in the dramatic story arc. And the third step, the third act, is the resolution where something new happens based on everything that's happened up until then, and all the pieces fit together in a different way. And we suddenly understand what the value is in the way that has gone together. There is now success grasped from the possibility of failure or doom or tragedy. The reason I bring that up is because why is a question that we generally ask when we're involved in a second act, either ours or somebody else's. Why is this happening? Why would God let this happen? And those are 2 different questions. So we'll start with why would God let this happen? I'm going to get back to basics again, which is the thing that I usually do. We're going to do the fundamentals. Why would God let this happen? Is because there is only God. It doesn't matter what our creation story is. And I'll go over some of the creation stories because I got some time now. But it doesn't matter what our creation story is, there is only God. In Scripture, it says, in the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be, and there was. And all of the things that are now are because that one divine power and presence that we call God began sharing itself as its creation, bringing light and good and firmament, whatever that is, into experience. So everything that exists everywhere is that divine presence. It is the infinite itself. If we like science better, the story is the Big Bang. And there was a singularity, possibly dense, and for some reason it began expanding or exploding, the Big Bang. And everything that exists everywhere is coming from the limitless energy of that explosion. Everything has been evolving and emanating and recombining amongst itself for the last 14.2 billion years to bring us to the point where we are now. Everything, every place, every planet, every person, everything is an expression, an individualization, or as I like to say, a particularization, because we're all these particles that we seem to be experiencing. We're all particularizations of that one Big Bang. We're ways that that Big Bang has been evolving and is coming about. So in that story, the completely scientific atheist version of the story, the same thing. We all trace our lineage back to that one. So the question of why do bad things happen to good people? And there's only one category of people. That divine essence, that limitless God love, that divine source is God itself. And we're individualizations of it. So is everyone. Everything, everywhere, everyone, every particle, everything is that divine essence expressed in its own way. So bad things happen to good people because there are no bad people. They're just people, expressions of that one infinite creative presence, that one divine power. So when we say, why does this happen? Why would God let this happen? The reason that God would let this happen is because it can. Because if this is the sort of thing that couldn't possibly happen, then it never would. And there would never be the possibility of it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that go way beyond my imagination, and probably yours as well, that are just off the table, things that we don't consider to be in the realm of possibility. So we don't worry about them, we don't think about them. It's in that narrow range of things that might happen, or could happen, or have happened in the past that we don't want to have happen again, that we define those as the bad things. And then the good people are the ones who we like, the ones who we're friends with, who those things happen to. And if those things happen to people who we don't like or dislike, well, for most people, that's just fine. It doesn't matter if something horrible happens to your enemy. It matters greatly if something horrible happens to a friend. And the idea of the difference between a friend and an enemy, and the difference between a good thing and a bad thing, is all a matter of perspective and judgment. So be honest with yourself. Is there somebody in your life who was a really good friend for a while, and then something happened, and they're now an enemy, or an adversary, or for whatever reason, no longer a friend? Is there somebody who was an adversary or a tormentor, or somebody who was just a nuisance to you, who you then wound up having an interaction with, and they became a friend? The difference between the good people and the bad people is all our own judgment. We like the good people, and we don't like the bad people, and we like the good things, and we don't like the bad things. And let's stop talking about the other people and the things as though they have intrinsic value, and instead acknowledge that that value is something that we attach ourselves. That is a judgment. Some of it is completely reasonable. Illness, violence, warfare are all things that lots and lots of people agree are bad. And that's perfectly reasonable to agree that those are bad. But that is us agreeing on the same judgment. That's something that we culturally get to do. And sometimes that happens within our group, our family, our tribe, our nation, our whatever division we have. We have this tendency to take that infinite creative presence, that one divine love that is sharing itself in all these different ways, and divvy it up into us and them. And then we decide that when good things happen to us, or bad things happen to them, it's okay, and vice versa is not okay. So, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do these horrible things happen? Why is this happening to me? The answer is because it can. And just because it can doesn't mean that it has to. And just because it is doesn't mean that it needs to continue. That's the other part of the practical prayer technique, is that when we are experiencing something that we don't like, instead of judging it to be bad, we can look at it, understand that we'd like to be experiencing something better, and then get involved in the prayer practice where we're partnering with that infinite creative power to create something different. How does that work? Talk about it after the break.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I am Reverend Bill Marcione, running solo again today. Carol is taking the week off. She'll be back again in the next episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast. And I am delighted to be able to spend some one-on-one time with you. And we're talking about how and why. And more importantly, the reason that how and why are both completely unreasonable questions. So we already went over why. Why is an unacceptable question. And the answer is because it can. Why does this happen? Because it can. Why me? Because it can be you. And the next result in that is that we get to choose the experience that we want to be having instead. In a lot of cases, the experiences that we have are indicators that I'd like to have something different. Something comes up, it's like the check engine light comes on your dashboard, and that tells you that it's time to take a look at the engine and understand what's going on in there and take some corrective action. In the old radio show, Car Talk, they used to talk about people who had a check engine light that came on and just stayed on, and they knew it was wrong with the engine, and it just became bothersome, so they got a piece of black electrical tape and put it over the check engine light. And that solves the immediate problem of being annoyed by the check engine light, but it doesn't do anything to fix the engine. So when something's going on in our life that we don't like, that's an indicator that there's something that we'd like to have instead. And that's where we get to use the practical prayer technique to create something new in our lives. And I'll go over the prayer technique again because you guys have been around for a while, because I like doing that. What we get to do in that practical prayer, though, is we get to change the experience of life that we're having. We get to open up a new invitation and let that infinite creative power create something different. And a lot of times the question comes up of how's this going to work? How is that going to happen? How can I possibly? And that's another inappropriate question. It doesn't matter how. It's none of our business how. I sometimes describe the creative process in the universe. Some people love the story of the Big Bang. Some people love the story of Scripture. Some people think this is all here, and we get to their creation story. It's just a coincidence. It's just here because it's here. And things happen because they happen. And let's say that it's all a big happy coincidence, and everything is the law of averages. So according to the law of averages, half the time this is going to happen, the other half of the time that's going to happen. Well, if I'm playing along in this universe where the good thing happens half the time and the bad things happen half the time, and by the way, good and bad is just my judgment. It's preference. There are some people who don't like the stuff that I do like and vice versa. So what we can do is, knowing that we're partnered with this infinite creative power, we can choose which side of that combination we'd like to be on and set the intention to be part of whatever it is that we consider to be good. So instead of having a 50-50 chance, we're much more aligned and activating the law of attraction towards what it is that we want to be experiencing rather than something else. And how can that possibly work? Don't know. I don't know how it works. I just know that it does. I have been doing practical prayer long enough and seen spectacular results often enough that I know that it works. And the scientists call that empirically. Now, I don't know exactly what the technique is or what the formula is for exactly how this is happening and how the creative law in the universe works. I can tell you how gravity works. You let go of something and it falls. But I'm not sure, and nor does anybody else have a deep awareness or understanding of the exact process, the physics, what's behind the physics there. So I don't need to know how it works. I just need to know how to work it. And how is none of my business. So there have been numerous experiences that I've had where somebody is having an issue with their finances. Not enough money to pay the bills, struggling, facing the bankruptcy and foreclosure and losing their homes and being completely incapable of supporting themselves and living a wholesome financial life. And then somehow it's turned around. We do a prayer for prosperity, and somehow the pieces fit together. And you've all heard those conversations that somebody says, I was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, fill in the blank. Well, that's what it looks like when it happens. I don't know what causes that to happen, but there are so many times when I'll be out for a walk thinking about a friend of mine, and I get home and there's an email from them, or the phone rings and it's them. And I was going to call them, I just didn't get around to it, and then there they are. And that's the way it works. Do I know how it is that they were prompted or cued to go ahead and call me at that particular time? Nope, no idea. I do know that there's probably something energetically and emotionally going on. There's something unseen down below the surface that's activating that law of attraction and resonating so that that desire for communication happens on both ends. And then it doesn't matter who initiates the call or the contact. The same thing with a job. People, looking for a job. It's not like you're going to go get a job. There is a job out there, and somebody is looking to give that job away because they need somebody to do the job. It's not about me getting a job. It's about me doing a job. It's not about the boss giving away a job. It's about the boss getting that job, that position filled. So when we set our intention, instead of I'm going to get a job, to say I have a very specific set of skills and talents and abilities, and I'm willing to share those in a way that brings uplift to me and to my employer and to the constituency, the clientele that we're going to be working with. And I'm going to do that in a way that brings value. And the person who is looking for that value is willing to pay me generously to do it. Because without me, the job doesn't get done. That's a completely different mindset than, where am I going to get a job? And I have also been involved in enough times in having that clarity about the gifts that I have and what I'd like to be sharing and what I'd like to be doing. And then somehow the pieces all fit together, that I don't need to go through that usual process of let me fill out a whole bunch of resumes and spend a lot of time looking and a good long process. And I started doing this unwittingly decades ago. I was reviewing the times that I've applied for a job by filling out an application or going through the usual HR process. I think the last time I did that at all was in the 1980s, and not even really then, because I saw the ad was listed in a newspaper, but I knew somebody, and it wound up being an inside job in any case. And it's not to say that everybody is going to do that, but in each of these jobs that I've had, and there have been multiple careers where I've done that, it's about me having a very clear idea of the skills and the abilities and the resources that I'm bringing, that I'm willing to share, that I'm eager to share, and that they're valuable. And that turns into a job opportunity and an income opportunity and an opportunity to share some of those gifts and to create something wonderful in the world. And I'm not saying this to boast on myself. I'm saying this because it's an example of what we all not only can do, but are doing all the time. How does that employer know that I'm looking for them? How does that employer know that this is the right opportunity? I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I don't know. I am going to be aware of what I'm bringing. I'm going to open myself to those possibilities. And when I am guided to take a step, to make a phone call, to send an email, to do something, to ask a question, I'm going to do what I'm guided to do and then see what happens. The most recent job that I got for an outside company was 10 years ago. And I'd become aware that there's this company two towns over that's doing something that was similar to what I'd been doing. And I really liked it, and I thought that I'd be able to add something. So I called up the president of the company. He says, "Oh, you should talk to our chief executive officer." So I talked to him. He is the owner of the company. And we had a conversation. He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know but I am absolutely certain that there's stuff that you, sir, are spending your time on that if your board of directors finds out that you're spending that much time on, they're going to get a little annoyed. So let me do that stuff for you so that you can do the stuff that they'll be happy about." And he said, "Oh, okay." And I had the skill set and it was the right fit. And I have worked there for 5 years and did a wonderful job and was very happy to be able to share my gifts that way. I was delightedly happy to be able to leave that and go on and do the ministry work that I'm doing with Practical Prayer full time after that. How does it happen? I don't know how it happens. It doesn't matter. The specifics of the how. How is an unreasonable question. There's one more unreasonable question. When something is going on for somebody, when they keep on having problems and difficulties and turmoil, there's a lot of tendency for people, especially the people who are involved in New Thought and the New Thought thinking and Practical Prayer, because we know everything comes from consciousness, is to look at somebody else and say, "What's in your consciousness?" Because obviously there's something that's creating this and it must be in your consciousness. So then you ask that offensive question, "What's in your consciousness?" And that's an off-limits question. We have no idea. We can tell what's in someone's consciousness because of the life that they're leading, because of the experience that they're having. And we never have any idea whether they're in their desired third act, where everything has come together, or if they're going through the explosion and turmoil of a second act. What's happening in a lot of cases where there's something that's going wrong, where the girl left or the job went away or the problems come along, that is paving the way for something new and something different. Have you ever had an experience where you had a friendship or a relationship or a job experience that seems to be going along just fine, and then it exploded, came apart, it was no longer there? Shocked, bereft, destitute, holding your head, wondering what happened. And then eventually you pick up the pieces and you do something different. And only later it becomes apparent that if I'd kept doing the thing that I was doing before, I wouldn't have had the space to do this new thing that's much more important, that's much more relevant in my life instead. Sometimes the universe forces us to let go, to make way for something new coming along. So never ask somebody what's in their consciousness, and certainly never do it with judgment like, "Oh, well, the thing that's happening to you is bad, and therefore it's your consciousness. So what bad thing is in your consciousness that made this thing happen?" It's an opportunity to be empathetic, to say, "Ooh, you got some stuff going on. Wonder what's coming next. Wonder how those gifts are going to be shared in a new way next. Interesting." Let's take a break and then do a prayer. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class. Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I am Bill Marcioni, running solo today. Carol Lawrence will be back with us again next week. Delighted to have you with us. And we've been talking about how and why and other unfair questions. Because how and why are really none of our business. We are much more interested in what and how does it feel. So the prayer today is to let go of how and why. To let go of the judgment about what's in my consciousness, to let go of thinking that when this happens, I'll be okay. When that happens, everything will be all right. Because the implication there is that it's not all right now, that there is a problem that is bigger than we are. And there are times when the problem seems huge and significant. And the fact is, there is something bigger than the problems. And that's where practical prayer comes in. When we're faced with a problem, a situation, a circumstance, a challenge, we get to turn our attention to that infinite creative power, that one divine presence, that one limitless love, that divine energy and substance that is sharing itself as all of its creation. Everything is that one divine power and presence expressed in its own unique way. Everything, everyone, everywhere, every moment, every particle, every person, every planet, everything can trace its lineage and heritage and story back to the Big Bang or to the moment when the infinite said, let there be. We are all divine expressions, unique combinations of that limitless love. And that divine creative process continues to unfold. It is a conscious process. That same let there be intention is still active. When the infinite said, let there be, what responded was the law. There is a creative law that has been responding. As that Big Bang happened, all of the physical laws of the universe came into being at the same moment. And they have been applying and unfolding and revealing themselves in more completion and more detail throughout history. And sometimes we come to a new understanding of how one of these laws applies or works. The laws of aerodynamics worked even before we knew how airplanes worked. The law of aerodynamics existed from the very beginning of time. It took a while for there to be air to have the dynamics. And yet the laws are all there. That creative process is already underway. Everything that exists now is a result of some combination of that infinite intelligence, that divine love, that limitless energy and substance forming and shaping and arranging itself in a particular way. That creation includes me. That creation includes each one within the sound of my voice. That divine love is right here, right now. And each one is a unique combination of gifts and talents and skills and abilities and perspective and understanding and history and knowledge. Each one of us is a gift in our own unique way. And so as we open ourselves and allow that gift to be shared, as we let loose our need to know how it's going to happen, or our judgment about the bad things that have happened previously and the good things that we need to have instead. As we open to the possibilities of love and good and harmony unfolding, we are each guided to those next perfect steps to bring that experience of uplift, of harmony, of creativity, of prosperity, of health and vitality, of comfort, creativity, wellness, and love into our lives and into the world. That is an active intention, an invitation released into that creative law that creates everything. And it's creating this goodness now for each of us, experiencing it in our own way, being that bright light of love unfolding. So the good is at hand now and continues to be revealed for each of us and for all of us. And for this, I'm deeply grateful. And with a feeling of thanks for all of this good already unfolding and continuing to do so, I speak this word and release it into the creative law that's always creating. And I let it be. And I know it's already so. And so it is.
The
Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.